I never thought much about teeth before this happened. They fall out when you are young and grow back. They ache when you are older and sometimes need to be pulled out. You brush them, you try to keep them clean, and you do not think of them again. But teeth carry pieces of you. They stay long after you die. And one tooth, left behind in the wrong place, can carry more than you could ever want. I used to live alone in a small apartment on the edge of town. The building was old with creaking floors and water that ran brown in the mornings, but rent was cheap, and I did not mind. One day while cleaning behind the radiator, I found something small wedged in the dust. At first I thought it was a bead or a piece of glass, but when I picked it up, I realized it was a tooth. It was not like a fake plastic tooth or something from a toy. It was real, slightly yellowed with a small crack running along the root. I told myself it was probably left by a child who used to live here. Maybe it slipped through a crack in the floorboards years ago. But there was something wrong about the way it looked. It was heavy for its size. It was cold even though the radiator had been running hot all day. I should have thrown it away, but instead I put it in a small dish on the counter. Something about it felt too strange to toss in the trash. I did not even know why I kept it. That night, when I tried to sleep, I heard something faint. A hum. At first I thought it was the pipes or a neighbor's TV. But when I got up and pressed my ear against the wall, it grew quieter. When I stepped into the kitchen, it grew louder. The sound was coming from the dish. It was not loud like a song or a machine. It was more like the vibration of a throat when someone is humming softly to themselves. The tooth was the source. I leaned close to it and felt a faint buzzing rise in my jaw as if my own teeth were answering it. I pushed the dish into a drawer and tried to forget it. Sleep did not come easily. My dreams were filled with the sensation of something pressing against my gums from the inside, as though another row of teeth were waiting to break through. In the dream, my mouth was full, and I could barely breathe around them. When I woke, I touched my teeth one by one, making sure none had shifted. The next day, I left the apartment early. I did not want to be near it, but all day I felt a weight in my pocket. Only when I checked did I realize I had slipped the tooth into it without remembering. I threw it into the gutter outside the building. I watched it roll toward the drain and vanish. Relief washed over me. That night, the humming returned. I searched the counter. The dish was empty, but when I looked under my pillow, the tooth was there waiting. Its crack had widened and the edges looked sharp. I did not sleep after that. I thought about leaving the apartment that night, but exhaustion and stubbornness kept me there. I told myself it was a trick of memory. Maybe I had not thrown the tooth away. Maybe I only imagined it rolling into the gutter. The mind can fill in blanks, and my mind had been restless since the first night I heard that hum. I placed the tooth back into the dish on the counter and stared at it for a long time. It was so ordinary, yet my skin crawled whenever I looked at it too long. I tried to sleep with the bedroom door shut tight and the dish sealed in a drawer. The hum was muffled but never gone. It was inside my head, now resonating faintly like pressure in the ears on an airplane. Hours passed, and I realized I was listening more than sleeping. The sound seemed to change if I focused hard enough. At first it was steady and low, but then it shifted, rising and falling like breath. At moments it almost carried a tune, but not one I recognized. When dawn came, I was afraid to open the drawer. I forced myself to. The tooth was there, but it had moved. Instead of lying on its side, it now stood upright, balanced on its root. It should not have been possible, but it stayed that way even when I shook the drawer. That sight unsettled me more than the hum itself. I decided to take it far from me. That evening, I walked out past the highway and into the wooded area near the river. I dug a shallow hole with a stick and dropped the tooth inside, then covered it with dirt and stones. The act gave me a small rush of relief. I went home, and for the first time in days, the humming was absent. I slept deeply. The next morning, I woke to a sharp taste of iron in my mouth. I ran my tongue along my teeth and felt a gap where none had been. My right molar was missing. I bolted upright and spat into my hand. My mouth was bleeding. In my palm lay my molar slick with blood and warm. I panicked. My gums ached as though it had been pulled violently, but I had not felt it in the night. I cleaned the blood and staggered to the kitchen sink. When I opened the drawer, the tooth I had buried was there again. Only now there were two. My molar lay beside. It clean somehow, no trace of blood left upon it. Both of them stood upright on their roots. Both of them hummed in harmony. I told myself to leave to run, but something stronger held me. A strange pull. The sound drew me closer like gravity. I leaned in, and for a moment I swear I could hear words inside the hum. Not in any language I knew, but layered tones rising and falling together like voices beneath the surface of water. I slammed the drawer shut and left the apartment. I walked the streets aimlessly until nightfall, unable to shake the weight in my jaw. My teeth throbbed with each step as though they too wanted to leave me. My reflection in shop windows looked pale and drawn. At times I swore. I saw faint movement in my gums as if something pulsed beneath the skin. When I returned home, the air was thick with vibration. The drawer rattled faintly, though no one touched it. I tried to ignore it. I tried to read to drown it out with music, but the hum threaded itself beneath every sound like an unshakable undertone. Near midnight, my doorbell rang. I did not move at first. Few people ever visited me. It rang again longer this time. My nerves pushed me to check. No one was there when I opened the door, but a small white object lay on the floor mat. Another tooth. It was not mine. It was larger, sharper, and more decayed than any I had seen. When I picked it up, it was warm. I did not bring it inside, but the humming grew louder anyway. My head throbbed with it. My jaw ached with it. My body felt less like my own. That night, I dreamed I was pulling each of my teeth out one by one and laying them in neat rows. They hummed like a choir, and the sound filled me with both terror and a strange serenity, as though I was finally part of something I could not resist. I woke with blood on my pillow and one less incisor in my mouth. And on the counter dish beside the others now stood 3 teeth, all upright, all humming in unison. I stopped pretending it was only my imagination. 3 teeth stood waiting on the counter, and each one of them hummed with the same low, constant vibration. I could feel it even when I was not in the kitchen. My skull carried the sound. My jaw ached as though every remaining tooth in my mouth wanted to rattle loose. Sleep was impossible. My gums swelled with pressure. It felt like something alive was beneath them, pushing outward. I tried everything to rid myself of them. I swept the dish into a bag and carried it outside to the dumpster. The bag barely left my hand before the hum grew louder, as if punishing me for trying to separate myself from them. I ran inside and locked the door, but the sound only swelled. Minutes later, when I opened my closet to grab a jacket, the dish was already there on the floor waiting. The teeth stood in perfect formation. There was no blood on them, no dirt, no trace of my attempts to discard them. I started keeping my mouth clenched tight. My tongue never stopped searching the empty gaps and the sore, swollen gums that remained. Every time I swallowed, I could hear the faintest answering tone from inside my throat. I began to fear it was not only my teeth that wanted to leave me. One evening, I thought I heard someone humming outside my window, a low droning tone that matched the ones inside. I looked out, but the street was empty. Still, the sound persisted as though a figure stood just out of sight. I shut the curtains and tried not to breathe too loudly. The hum vibrated through the glass anyway. That night, I dreamed of faces with mouths pried wide, open rows upon rows of teeth spilling out onto the floor. The faces had no eyes, only lips pulled back to reveal gums torn and raw. The teeth did not lie still. They stood upright, humming in the same chorus that followed me even in waking hours. When I woke, another tooth was gone. This time I remembered feeling it. I woke in darkness and felt a sharp twist deep in my gum, as if invisible fingers wrenched it out. I tried to scream, but blood filled my throat. By morning, 4 teeth stood on the counter, humming together in unnatural harmony. I stopped going to work. I avoided mirrors. The gaps in my smile disgusted me, but worse was the way my remaining teeth seemed to tremble at the roots. I could not look at myself without imagining them pushing free and walking away from me one by one. I began to keep my lights on at night, but even brightness could not silence the sound. It followed me wherever I went. Soon I began to notice things outside my apartment. Teeth on the ground where they should not be. On the steps leading to the lobby. On the seat of the bus, I no longer had the strength to ride. Even in the frozen food aisle of the store, one lay upright between bags of peas and corn. They always looked like they had been waiting for me. And when I turned away, the faintest hum would rise beneath the silence. I picked one up in spite of myself. It was smooth and warm, pulsing faintly in my hand like the throb of a heart. I dropped it and left the store without buying anything. That night, the tooth appeared in the dish with the others, as if it had never left my possession. Now 5 stood there in a semicircle like worshippers at some altar. My dreams grew worse. Not only teeth now, but faces forming in the darkness. Faces shaped from gums, raw and bloody, pressing toward me with open mouths. They wanted me to join them. They wanted more of me than I could give. When I woke, I found myself touching my jaw with my fingers pressing on each tooth as if testing which would be next to abandon me. I realized it was not just about the teeth themselves. It was about what lived inside them. The humming was not random. It was a call, a voice that grew clearer every day, a voice that wanted more space, more flesh, more bone to hold itself within. And I knew soon it would not be satisfied with only my teeth. The teeth became my tether and my prison at the same time. By now, they occupied every flat surface in the apartment. The dish on the counter had become an altar. The sink rim, the windowsill, the top of the television, all were crowded with teeth standing on roots like pale little towers. They leaned toward one another as if in conversation. The humming had broadened into layers so dense I sometimes felt as if my skull were wrapped in cloth. It was no longer only a sound. It was a pressure, a presence, a thing that made the air taste metallic and old. I began to see movement in other people in the way I had seen it in myself, a slight tremor at the jawline, a hesitant hand going to the mouth, then pulling away embarrassed or fearful, or perhaps moved by something I could not name. Once a neighbor in the stairwell glanced at me and then stared down at a single tooth lying on the step, as if it had always been there. He picked it up and swallowed it without thinking, or maybe without choice. I do not know. He looked at me afterward with eyes that were raw and new, and he smiled with half his mouth missing like a child showing off a gap. He said nothing, but the hum around him seemed to sing back in my own teeth days, blurred the appetite for normality, evaporated my meals, were small and unimportant, but the teeth around me remained pristine as if kept by an invisible hand. They never became soiled or dull or broken, they glowed, with a faint wet sheen in the refrigerator. Like the more I tried to wash them, to scrub them, to rend them apart, the more they resisted my will, as if polished by whatever force now lived between their enamel and pulp. I tried to leave. I packed a bag, and I went to the car, but the hum found me in. The driver's seat, it was lower there, more insistent, as though the entity had learned to ride with me. It settled behind my teeth and pulled at a cord that ran through my skull, and I could feel my molars loosen under the pressure. I drove in a blur and parked at the side of the highway. And then I sat with the car idling as sweat cooled on my neck. I opened the glove compartment, and there inside the small pouch I had left when I moved in was a single tooth, one of the ones I thought I had buried or thrown away. The pouch hummed with the same voice as the apartment, as the city, as something much older than both of them. When I returned, the apartment had changed in ways I could not name. The walls seemed thinner, and the night thicker. The curtains folded themselves to make eyes. The mirror no longer reflected only me. It returned a version of my face with more teeth than should have been allowed. The mouth was a splitscape, a gorge of pale teeth filling the lower half of my reflection, and the humming originated there like the echo of a hymn. I thought I might pass out from the intensity of it. That night the thing behind the teeth made itself known in a way that removed any doubt about what it wanted. I woke to the sensation of someone or something leaning over me, hands cold on my cheeks. I tried to move, and my arms were let. I opened my mouth to call out, but the sound that left folded inside the hum and came back as a tone that felt like a bite. The thing slipped a finger into my mouth, not with skin, but with the texture of something hard like root, and as it touched my gums, I could feel it tracing an order. It did not speak in words as I know them, but an idea entered me like a cutaneous memory. This is how it grows, it said. Without speaking, this is how it remembers itself. This is how it keeps what it was once given teeth. It will live given mouths. It will be it withdrew like a tide, leaving soreness and the deceptive peace of having been chosen. I staggered to the counter, and the teeth turned, as if to greet the newcomer. 5, 6, 7, 8. They had multiplied while I slept until they formed a ring around the kitchen light like teeth in a crown. Seeing them arranged that way gave me the certainty I had feared and not allowed to name. There was an intelligence in the placement, in the way each one leaned, just so. There was a design based on hunger and history. From then on, the nights were worse than the days the teeth worked on me with patience and method. They made me dream of deep gatherings, whispering lists of names in a language of enamel. They showed me images of mouths on rocks, mouths in trees, mouths in the dark places between floorboards. Teeth, always teeth, and always the same slow instruction. Place them, offer them, leave them, let them stand like soldiers, let them hum until something forms inside their circle. I have fought back in the ways a person can fight who still clings to some last measure of self. I wrapped my gums in gauze. I stuffed cotton between the gaps. I slept with a mouth guard. I glued my lips with a stubborn paste. I counted my remaining teeth until my head swam, but the more I resisted, the more inventive it became. Once I woke in the morning with one of my cheeks bruised and a new tooth sitting on my bedside table that I did not remember owning. It was small and finely shaped like a tooth from an animal, yet human enough to be recognized by my hand. The hum it gave off was softer, like the whisper of child. Learning to sing, there were clues in the old records I found when I began to look. I went to the library and rifled through neighborhood reports and property registries and old calendar pages. I read about a dentist who had practiced in the building many decades earlier, a man whose presence was noted in the margins of the old town papers for reasons vague and sinister. He had been a collector of things that fell out of bodies and out of places, and his patient list had included those with mouths that sounded like bells. He had disappeared one winter, and the office had been shuttered, and then the building had been converted, and then converted again, and the apartment had been rented, and through all the small things he kept had gone missing from stone and soil and mouth alike. The more I dug, the more it felt like threading my way back through teeth, a map of consumption and keeping. I found a ledger with entries written in a cramped hand, tally of extractions, tally of purchases, tally of teeth filed and stored. The ledger smelled old and sweet like antiseptic, and rust in the margins were notes that read like recipes, a list of pairings that would make something sing. The handwriting circled a single line of instruction: use more hose to make the chorus whole. I understood it then in the dull, stunned clarity of someone who has watched the slow mechanics of a machine unfold. The thing wanted bodies to fill it with teeth. It wanted a choir of mouths forming a shared cavity, a place where it could dwell and remember and sing itself into being. It wanted not only my teeth, but my neighbor's teeth, and any teeth it could coax loose from any living mouth. And if it could build that chorus, then it would have a voice strong enough to cross walls and cross years and become more than the small thing it had been. I knew the danger of telling anyone. How do you explain teeth standing on a counter and humming without sounding unmoored? How do you show a ledger of teeth without someone assuming some grotesque prank or a mind unhinged? But silence also felt like consent, and in the quiet moments between the humming, I tried a plan. I thought of fire, of acid, of smashing, of burying, of salt, of holy things. I tried them one by one, and each time the teeth came back unmarked, as if the act of destroying them fed them instead of starving them. And then the building itself began to cough up teeth. The plaster crumbled, and small white shapes tumbled out onto the stairwell like hail. I heard bricks chip, and in the fissures I found rows of teeth packed into cavities, as if a nest had been fashioned from the remains of mouths. The hum multiplied. It was no longer contained in my apartment. It became the building's heartbeat, and it was everywhere I walked up the stairs. More teeth appeared on steps at the landing at the mailbox like small pale warnings or invitations. By the time I understood the scale of what the thing would do if it succeeded, I had already become a minnow in a net. The teeth that remained in my mouth, a dwindling few, felt less like parts of me and more like the last lit windows in a town about to be swallowed by fog. I had to decide in a single night whether to try to save myself or to try to stop it from reaching further. I had to choose between removing the last anchors and letting it empty me, or finding some way to prevent it from filling itself further. I had no idea how to stop something that used human mouths as scaffolding, or if stopping it would only make it angrier. The humming had learned my sleep schedule and my breathing pattern, and the way I bent to tie my shoes. It had become attached to my body with a tenderness that felt like hunger. The next morning my mouth was cold and nearly empty. My tongue bumped against the slab of my jaw, and there was a new silence that was terrifying for its clarity. The teeth on the counter did not hum as they had. The stillness was not relief, it was prelude. I would not live through what happened next without telling someone what came before and why the ring of teeth had been assembled around the light. But I also knew that telling might be the exact shape of permission The ledger hinted that I had to pause and think. And in that pause, the thing behind the teeth rehearsed its next move like a conductor raising his hand and waiting for the moment to strike. I did not know whether I could stop it or if my actions would only sharpen the sound. It was all I could do to breathe and to remember the ledger and the single line that had felt like a recipe. Use more hosts to make the chorus whole. The problem was every person was a host, and the tooth left behind wanted them all. I pressed my palms to my face and tried to feel what remained of me, and through skin and bone and the hush of the apartment, I heard a new pulse, not yet a hum, a possibility, a plan forming in the spaces between teeth and thought. And then something on the windowsill shifted, and the teeth turned their faces toward me, as if in answer to a question I had not yet been brave enough to ask. I had been emptied almost completely by then. My mouth was a wreck of swollen gum and blackened root. The few teeth that clung stubbornly to my jaw rattled with each breath like loose stones in a tin. I tried to hold on to them, as though they were the last anchors of my identity, but even they throbbed with the inevitable pull to join the others. The apartment was no longer an apartment. It was a chamber. Every surface had been claimed. Teeth jutted from the walls like growths. They sprouted from cracks in the floorboards, from the seams of the windows, from the ceiling above my bed. Each one hummed in perfect synchrony, a low drone that resonated with the rhythm of my heartbeat until I could no longer tell which pulse was mine and which belonged to them. I tried to fight. I carried a hammer from the closet and swung wildly, shattering dozens of them in a frenzy of pain and desperation. The moment I crushed one, the fragments rolled like beads of glass across the floor and reassembled themselves upright, flawless again. My effort only made the hum louder, like the choir was mocking my defiance. It was not just my apartment anymore. The building itself had become part of the mouth. I heard neighbors crying through the walls, voices muffled and wet, but never words. When I pounded on their doors, no one answered. Instead, teeth spilled from beneath their thresholds, lining the hallway in neat rows like soldiers. The humming filled the stairwell, the lobby, even the streets beyond when I forced myself outside. Everywhere I went, teeth followed. On bus seats, in the cracks of sidewalks, beneath the wheels of passing cars. The sound was inescapable. My skull vibrated with it until I realized it wasn't just inside my head. My ribs rattled with each hum. My spine shivered with it. Even my nails began to ache as though they too wanted to pull themselves free. And then came the faces. Not full bodies, never whole. Only faces formed of gums and teeth, raw and unfinished. They leaned from the shadows, pressed against the glass, appeared in the corners of rooms where no light could touch. They had no eyes, no skin, only mouths upon mouths, opening and closing as the hum rolled out of them. When they leaned close, I felt their breath cold and metallic against my skin. I tried to call someone, anyone, but when I opened my mouth, the hum came out instead of my voice. A low droning tone that bent to the rhythm of the teeth in the room. I realized then that I was no longer separate from it. I was part of its chorus. The final night was the longest of my life. I had barricaded myself in the bedroom, though the barricade meant nothing. The teeth grew through walls and would as easily as soil. I sat on the floor, my tongue pressing against gums that felt paper thin, and I begged silently for it to stop. But silence is the one thing it cannot tolerate. The air thickened and the hum rose to a fever pitch. Every tooth in the room vibrated. Every wall shook with the resonance of something vast and ancient. My jaw split open without my control. I felt a final tearing sensation as the last of my teeth broke free. They floated upright before me, not falling but standing, balancing on their roots as if gravity itself bent in their favor. One by one, they joined the circle that had formed across the floor, a perfect ring of teeth humming in unison. The sound rose higher. The vibration deepened until the floorboards cracked beneath it, and then something began to rise from the center of the ring. It was not a body. It was not even a shape the mind could hold. It was a mouth without a face, a cavern rimmed with teeth that multiplied endlessly as they pushed outward. The hum became a voice then, not words but a vast, knowing resonance that filled the marrow of my bones. It was the sound of hunger given form. I tried to close my eyes, but they refused. I tried to cover my ears, but the hum came from inside me. The mouth stretched wider, and I knew it was not only mine, it was everyone's. All the teeth it had claimed gathered to give flesh. My neighbors, strangers in the street, the people I had seen with jaws trembling and eyes hollow, they were all part of this. The thing leaned toward me. Its voice pressed through my ribs and spine, and I understood its promise. It would never stop. It would never be contained by walls or oceans or death itself. Wherever teeth remained, it would hum, and sooner or later, all of them would be drawn to it. The last thing I remember before darkness took me was the sensation of something wet and cold pressing into the soft tissue of my empty gums. New teeth sliding into place, sharper and heavier than the ones I had lost. They rooted themselves in me, humming as they settled, binding me to the choir. Now the hum never leaves. It follows me when I walk outside. It fills my dreams with rows of faces made of mouths. People glance at me with recognition in their eyes, as if they can hear it too, though they pretend not to. And sometimes I see them later spitting blood into the gutter, clutching a loose tooth in their palm. I want to warn you, but warning is another kind of permission. All I can do is tell it exactly as it happened. The hum is not mine alone anymore. It spreads through the teeth we leave behind, through every root lodged in bone or soil, through every crown that rattles in a child's mouth. And if you ever find one left behind where it should not be, do not keep it. Do not carry it. Do not even touch it, because once you hear the hum, it is already inside you.